Matt Rhule hears you. Nebraska has some issues to fix with its screen game. The coach knows it. We'll talk about it next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place a $5 wager, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
Okay, good morning. Happy Tuesday. Connor Happer from 1620 The Zone. Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Do you feel better now that the Big Ten has issued a statement on officiating and what they missed? We'll talk about that as we go on.
It wasn't an apology. So it was pointed out to me that there was no apology in the statement. So if I said or anybody said that it was an apology, no.
It was a recognition. We will talk about that as we go on throughout today's show. But the screen game, Mitch, as you mentioned, was the other big topic at the Monday press conference from Matt Rhule. It was not good. Nebraska hardly got any yards off of their screen game on Saturday against Ohio State. Matt Rhule understands your frustration, so let's play that clip.
I'm very humble when I say this. I completely understand why people are frustrated, right? Completely, you know. At the same time, what I would say is you go block that front without throwing a couple screens and tell me, okay, I mean, they're dominant, absolutely dominant. There's some kids that feel really bad on our team because they see the heat that, like, you know, Sat's taking or I'm taking or whoever, and they know that they had a missed assignment. If they had blocked the man-to-man defender, the ball would have gone for about 50. So, you know, that being said, you know, you have some things built in, like, hey, we're running this play. If they bring zero blitz, throwing a screen. That's what kind of most people do. And they threw the screen, and we just didn't make the block or whatever. So we look at everything like we have to be better as coaches. Like, it always starts with us. There's one thing you're not allowed to do in our building. You can never say the players weren't good enough. You can never say, oh, so-and-so, he's not good enough. So, yeah, it wasn't good enough. The screen game wasn't good enough, you know. To have two on the final drive, you know, I can understand why people would be frustrated about that.
So he went on then to explain that Nebraska tried to throw the out pass to Jamal Banks on first down. He was called for offensive pass interference. They got behind the chains. They threw one screen, then they threw another screen. And I don't know that he justified throwing the screens, but he tried to explain the thinking that Nebraska had. And I think that was a lot of the frustration from the Nebraska fans, because the Huskers kind of went away from it in the second half when they started to get things going offensively. They found some rhythm, started to hit some downfield passes. The tight ends got involved. And then in the one situation where you absolutely needed to drive the field, there was no other alternative. Immediately, it went back to what seems to be like the comfort zone for Marcus Satterfield, and they called two screens out of three plays before the interception.
Yeah, here's the difficult part now with this, and you know, this is also we also come into this situation where Nebraska has not successfully executed a screen game. Like, they've not had a good screen game in a long time, right?
Early in the season, I think it was doing all right.
I agree. So, but like, you have this thing where, you know, when the coach comes up and he says, like, we had the best week of practice, you just get PTSD, right? You just get you just get this thing in your head. And so now we've reached a stage with the screen game where
whenever you see it,
if Nebraska starts to line up a screen, you're like, nope, this is automatically the wrong thing. I don't disagree with his thought process, right? They have they got a zero blitz coming at them. They got dudes who are running at them, like, really, really getting upfield. Throw the screen. So from that perspective, I'm not mad that they're calling it. I'm more mad that they can't block it, but then they can't block it. So then you probably shouldn't call it, right? So, like, and there was a couple that they popped during the game. I'll say this: I don't think they need to throw that in the trash can. Like, you can't throw it away. Just like you can't stop running the football. Like you have to keep trying these things and doing them. Nebraska's got to get better at them, first of all, but maybe not quite as heavy of a usage mark on that screen game.
So you start to think about why you're calling this, other than the obvious fact that you've got to slow down the Ohio State front. Like if they're allowed to just pin their ears back and come at you and there's no worry, you're going to throw this little pass over the top, a bubble, then hey, good night. Dylan's going to get hit and hit again. I think Nebraska, in addition to that, Nebraska sees the screen as really an extension of its run game. They're struggling. They have struggled. You saw some bright spots on Saturday at Ohio State and just the ability to line up and run the ball, which is an odd team to show improvement against, but it happened. We saw some positive gains from Dante Dowdell and Emmett Johnson. And this week, Nebraska will get Ramir Johnson back, who's probably the best player that Nebraska has on the roster at executing the screen.
It's the best receiver of the backs for sure.
From a yardage gained perspective and like how to follow blocks, he's the best they've got. But when they throw these screens, the other thing they're doing other than slowing down the front is this is part of their run game. They see it as an extension of that, along with the jet sweeps and the forward passes. And then we saw the inside handoff on the 2-point conversion, which I'm continuing to shake my head on why that was used on a 2-point conversion instead of a second and goal from the 3 or something. But now they've put it on tape. So it's gonna be that thing now. It's gonna be that thing when Nebraska throws a screen on Saturday against UCLA at Memorial Stadium and it gets blown up for a 2-yard loss the first time. The fans are going to grumble, and you're just going to get that feeling in Memorial Stadium, like what are they even doing? And the tweets will start to come in about Marcus Satterfield. So I thought it was interesting too that Rhule mentioned the players within the team feeling bad about that their OC is taking.
Yeah, acknowledging that Sat's taking some heat at the moment. Like I said, they have to keep doing it. So Nebraska has to get better at it consistently. And it lacks. It's not just the one guy missing a block. Like most of the time on Saturday, I think people will watch that and they'll be like, "Well, Banks missed the block," and that was kind of the story. But there's real specific timing. There's real specific touch that goes into this. So it's on everybody. Like that is a total team play, a total offense play. The offensive line has to be in the right position, find the right guy, and go block him. So Nebraska has to get better at that piece because they have to continue to do it. Like you said, it's a way they feel like they can get a couple yards at a time, right?
Or as Rhule said, pop it for 50.
And it also slows down the rush, right? It gives them something more to think about. But like the idea is, if it gives them more to think about, they're not getting upfield as fast. It results in more time for Dylan Raiola to make reads and make progressions and throw the football down the field. And we didn't really see that much. So like if it's going to be a setup for something, then you have to see the result of that thing at the end too.
True. Another aspect of this is that Raiola's good at throwing them. And Nebraska's had a long line of quarterbacks, even some of the quarterbacks who threw for a lot of yards. Like Tommy Armstrong threw for a ton of yards in his career. Adrian Martinez threw for a ton of yards in his career. And those guys weren't necessarily good at throwing the screens.
Yeah. Adrian was definitely no good at it.
Yeah. I mean, they would throw it flat. And they wouldn't, if they connected with the back at all or the receiver at all, the timing wasn't there. Quarterbacks at Nebraska over the last decade, or really historically, when they throw the ball, have been better at going downfield and better on the slants. And Dylan's very good at putting that touch on the ball and being able to hit the back over his shoulder or just in stride as he comes up toward the line of scrimmage. So you want to play to the strengths of the players that you have on your offense. And it is a strength for Dylan to throw short passes. So it's a strength for him to throw deep passes too, which is why he's a 5-star quarterback. But you've got to be able to block it. I thought in the first half watching Saturday in Columbus that there were multiple times where Nebraska was not one block away from taking a screen 50 yards. It looked
Yeah.
like there were 3 Ohio State defenders ready to tackle one player with maybe one blocker out there. And it was just blown up from the start. Like it wasn't going to work. They had it sniffed out. And there was just no reason at that point to even think about going back to it on Saturday. But they did continue to go back to it.
So just it's like a trigger warning. You're going to keep seeing this going forward. It's going to happen on Saturday, and it'll happen 2 Saturdays after that, and every Saturday or Friday for the rest of the season. So get yourself prepared for it. Coming back, another thing that you might see the rest of the season: bad officiating. Matt Rhule had an extensive comment on officiating yesterday. We'll parse through it next.
Okay, it's that time, Nebraska fans, to highlight our Roy Player of the Week. I want to tell you a little bit about Roy first. Roy is a new platform that lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes. Support your favorite athletes. What you do is you download Roy, ROY, for iOS or Android, and enter the referral code Locked On, and you'll automatically be entered in a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. That's nice, but there's more that's good about it. This week, we've selected, and we've been doing this every week, Deshaun Singleton as the Roy Player of the Week for Nebraska because of his strong play at safety against Ohio State. You saw Singleton out there making plays all day on Saturday in a solid effort for the Black Shirts. If you were impressed with his performance at Ohio State, you can show him some love. Just hop on Roy and display your appreciation for Deshaun Singleton, the Roy Player of the Week, after his standout performance, as well as what he'll continue to bring to the program. So get off the sidelines and get into the NIL game with Roy today. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. All right. Welcome back to the Locked On Nebraska podcast. On this Tuesday, we'll hear from Marcus Satterfield, Tony White, Dylan Raiola, and a number of Nebraska football players in Lincoln around the noon hour today on Tuesday as the Huskers look ahead to an attempt at bowl eligibility, a third attempt this year to get bowl eligible. And as UCLA comes into Memorial Stadium. So as you mentioned before the break, Connor, we had a long monologue of sorts from Matt Rhule on Monday about the officiating. I'm a little burned out, to be honest with you, on this topic. We spent some time on the show on Monday talking about it. It's been a topic throughout the season, and I generally try to evaluate these games without considering or taking the officiating too much into account. I believe that you win or lose based on your play and everything that happens during the week leading up to the game. This week, it's been difficult to ignore, and the Big Ten on Monday issued a statement saying that it erred on the second down in the spot with the official spot on the second down run by Emmett Johnson on Nebraska's last drive of the first half. Should have been awarded a first down, as we all know from seeing the play and seeing the replay. It was not. It brought up a third down. The clock did not stop to move the chains. Nebraska lost about 30 seconds of clock, valuable time that it could have used to try to score a touchdown on that possession, which did end with a 54-yard field goal by John Hull, the amazing Nebraska kicker.
John Hull.
Need like a meetup with John Hull and Gus Johnson. Like they need to have like a moment where the two of them come together and can share in their glory from the Nebraska Ohio State game. So where do you want to go with this? What stood out to you, Connor, about what Matt Rhule had to say on Monday about the officiating?
I thought he was I thought he was pretty funny. Because this is basically this amounts to almost, I think, or maybe it's more than a 5-minute speech about officiating. And at that point, they had gotten the statement from the conference about how this conference messed up. It wasn't an apology from the conference. It was just like, we got this wrong. Here's the acknowledgement. And so Rhule goes through his thoughts on officiating and replay. And I thought they were really good thoughts. Like I tend to agree with him on what he was getting to, and we'll talk about that in a second. But as he was discussing it, he would just throw in there, I appreciate the statement. I appreciate the statement. So
it was like, please don't find me.
yeah, right. It was like, I appreciate these statement. But basically the point he was getting to was it's really, really difficult for these officials because, and this is not, it wasn't like a woe is me for officials type of thing. It was like there is a lot of technology at play here with the fact that we could see every angle of everything and everything is replayed and the replays are triggered at weird moments and stuff like that. And so the officials oftentimes, and this is my biggest complaint with how instant replay affects sports, where there are these situations where the official won't be afraid to make the wrong call on the field because he knows he has the protection of the instant replay behind him. But
Correct.
how replay and challenge works in football is that the call on the field is extremely important. And then they go to
difficult
the replay,
to overturn.
and it's difficult to overturn. And so I think there's a whole bunch of stuff that's tied into there. And I like, we're not going backwards on replay. Cat's out of the bag, right? So it's just really hard for these guys. I mean, that wasn't it. There was a lot of stuff, and you know, it was a good. I thought it was a good summation of where officiating's at in college athletics right now.
What's so rare? Coaches are generally, they don't go near this stuff. They'll talk about it behind the scenes, off the record, whatever. You know, so will ADs. Troy Dannon was at Nebraska's press conference too, and he held court over on the side and gave some thoughts, some of which we can print, others maybe not. But
nice.
Look, Rhule had a lot to say, and it seemed like he'd go off on a tangent, and then every few minutes he'd drop in something like something new, like, hey, I got a truth bomb here. He said last year Nebraska had 3 replays that the league later admitted were incorrect. And then later on in his monologue, he said both times that he was flagged this year for unsportsmanlike conduct on the sideline, he heard from the league later that those were the incorrect calls. And then,
which makes it even more ridiculous that Ryan Day didn't get a flag for his antics on Saturday.
Yeah, super inconsistent. The league is if you look at the calls on video, the action that Matt Rhule took at Purdue and Indiana to get flagged, and then you watch Ryan Day at the end on Saturday. I'm not even saying that Ryan Day should absolutely get flagged. The point is, Matt Rhule did a fraction of what Ryan Day did and got 15 yards for it both times, and Day got a warning and no yards marked off. They would have been massive yards. If those yards would have been marked off in that situation, you would have been putting Nebraska on the Ohio State side of the field with 3 minutes to play in that game. I mean, you're talking about serious danger for Ohio State to lose the game in large part because of the penalty that was assessed on him, but you can't call it different because of the way it impacts the game. And then Rhule said at the end, I don't want any more apologies on Sunday. It can't happen against UCLA, can't happen against Iowa. These things can't happen moving forward. I thought that was probably the most bold portion of what he had to say on Monday about the officials.
You know, I think I think the Dannon part is pretty interesting too, about how he was there and, said his piece on officiating and Rhule, like, these people can only say so much, right? Because they'll get fined and it looks bad and or get reprimanded, whatever happens. But, I that quote that Rhule had after, I think it was after the Purdue game, sticks in my head, where I'm going to fight for Nebraska. Like, I think he, sort of wants that. And this is and he was specifically, more of that. When he said that, he was talking about officiating, and he was talking about with the league and, all that stuff. Like, so I think that is a notable, a notable shift, a notable change. Like, all right, we're going to talk about it and we're going to say it out loud, because oftentimes, especially in officiating, where we tend to, look, there was a loophole in a rule book that was closed immediately, like 48 hours after it happened in the Ohio State-Oregon game. Rules can be changed, and squeaky wheels get the grease. So, Nebraska is definitely taking that that disposition going forward, which I think is good because it's clear that the league listens to these things and they're willing to change. So I think Nebraska should complain more, to be honest with you, and it feels like they're headed that direction.
Final 2 points to make about this officiating conversation, and hopefully we won't be talking about this on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Right.
Today's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of this week and into next week. I'd like to just put this to rest and have it be an ugly chapter in this season. Unfortunately, it's been going on for a long time, and this is just the most visible example. The NCAA overturned the targeting call against Arvell Reese, Ohio State's linebacker, for the hit that he applied to Jamal Banks on the last drive for Nebraska and removed his suspension. So he will not have to sit the first half against Penn State this Saturday in a massive game with college football playoff implications and Big Ten championship implications. So that's interesting. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I just think it's interesting that you had this overturned because we've not generally seen these things get overturned before. Nebraska's appealed some of these questionable targeting calls, and they usually stand with what happened in the game. And then Rhule also said that he's not going to complain at any time about judgment calls. And these are some of the things that Nebraska fans and media, I think, have griped most about. Were the offensive pass interference calls, the 2 offensive pass interference calls, one against Banks to start the last drive, and then the one against Isaiah Nair at the end of the first half. And the holding calls are obviously judgment calls. Nebraska was held, and I'm sure Ohio State was held too. You know, in my view, I'm seeing more of the footage of Nebraska being held, but there's holding that's going on all over the place, and some of it's egregious, like when you're tackling a guy by his head and as he's running free to the quarterback.
That's a
and
big
that
one.
doesn't get called. That's hard to take, but Rhule's not gonna go down that road and pick a fight with the officials or the league for that.
All right, Mitch. Let's take our final break. We'll come back and we'll get back to football and the rest of the season here. 4 games left for Nebraska. 4 more shots to get bowl eligible. We'll talk about Rhule's confidence in that as they head into UCLA week. Coming back on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. All right, football fans, you can start the season and get midway through your season, I suppose, with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. But you're never too late to start on the FanDuel sportsbook. So when you get that hunch in the middle of a game, you get that itch, you can check out the latest live stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more right on that same page where you place all your bets. That is with the FanDuel Sportsbook app or at FanDuel.com. And to get you started, we're going to get you going with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Once again, place your first $5 bet, and you're getting started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. All you have to do is head to FanDuel.com and place a bet on whatever you might like. That is with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Okay, we're back. Mitch Sherman, Connor Happer with you. Appreciate you guys listening, subscribing. Almost another month down on the show.
Happy Halloween,
November, Mitch.
A couple days early. Are you going to dress up? You going to dress up the little girl for Halloween this year?
I don't know. I wonder. I wonder
New
if
parenting decision.
Yeah, I wonder if my wife has something planned. I bet there's something in the hopper. I got to get on that probably. I don't know.
I mean, she's too young to like anything. Next year is going to be fun for you on Halloween, Connor.
Yeah,
and the
but
year
she's
after.
Like, at this point, my daughter, who is 3 months old, is like an accessory. So you could just dress her up however you'd like. I think. Which we take great pride in doing. Pictures are great. The cuteness level is pretty off the charts right now.
Yeah, you got many years of Halloween fun ahead of you. I'm on the back end of it, where my 13-year-old is like, "Dad, should I go trick or treating?" I'm like, "You can go.
I don't care.
Probably gonna just walk around, maybe have a beer or something. But if you want to go with your friends, go ahead." And then my senior, she'll go hang out with. Nah, there's no. We've that part of our lives is in the past. It's kind of sad.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Nebraska on the other hand, is seeking bowl eligibility it was right around this time last year where the chase begun, right? Nebraska was at 5-3 going into their final 4 games. They didn't win any of them. Nebraska is now 5-3 going into their final 4 games. It was at this point last year where I guaranteed Nebraska was going to a bowl game. I was confident. I was like, book your trip to Vegas, put those refundable deposits in for your trips. Nebraska,
New York. Yeah.
New York, wherever it might be. I'm going to double down. I still think Nebraska is going to find a way to win 1 out of these last 4. I probably feel even a little bit better about it than I did last year. Matt Rhule seemed pretty confident as well.
Well, I think he's confident in where the team's at. One thing he wouldn't do on Monday was go down the road of talking about bowl eligibility. And when he talks again on Thursday, you're not going to get Matt Rhule to answer the question of what would it mean if your program is able to get this 6th win and be able to extend the season into December and get all those extra practices. And when you're recruiting and you have the transfer portal open, you can bring players in and show them practice. Like, he's not going to go down that road. He's not talking about it. He felt that last year Nebraska was chasing that last win, that 6th win, and that impacted its ability to play free in those games: Michigan State, Maryland, Wisconsin, Iowa.
It has felt like a roadblock. I mean, like, whether it's real or not, Nebraska needs to get over that hump. It's real. Like, it's there.
Yeah. And I think it was real against Indiana. Like, he mentioned that he felt kind of that same chasing kind of vibe from the team when the Huskers went to Bloomington, Indiana, and played horribly, that they were thinking too much. They were thinking about, what could happen if they won a game. And then he said he felt like they kind of conquered that demon against Ohio State. Maybe because the players weren't feeling the same kind of confidence that it could happen. So they said, let's just go out and throw it all out there. So maybe do you get back in the situation? What he's trying to avoid is for them to get back in that same mindset, that chasing mindset here on Saturday against UCLA.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, they have to bring the same, and it's like, I think from a bigger picture standpoint, it would be disappointing to fans if they didn't look the same against UCLA as they did against Ohio State, right? That's the standard. I think that's a big part of the reason that people have sort of been frustrated with October, because we saw what they did in September against what turned out to be a pretty good team, in Colorado. Like, they blitzed the hell out of them. And we're up 28-0 at halftime and won 28-10. That's a good team. They might win the Big 12. I don't know. Like,
yeah.
Like, the playoff.
Oh my gosh. Could you imagine if they go to the playoff? I think, and we'll talk more about this as the week goes on, that this UCLA game has a chance to be the closest thing we've seen from Nebraska to a Colorado level of energy and excitement to come out at Memorial Stadium since that day in week 2.
Love it. Yeah, I love the idea. It's definitely starting to feel like there's a build up and a buzz to it, because what came along with that Colorado game was this confidence, right? Like, it's happening today. Nebraska is beating Colorado today. They haven't done it in a decade plus. Like, they're beating them today. And I think now it's this feeling going into this week of like, it's happening. They're going back to the bowl game. There's this monkey that's going to be off their shoulder, and then we can get to the next thing. Whatever that next thing is the program, identify that, but that's after Saturday. It's been a big roadblock. I think that's definitely for sure.
Yeah. So a lot of questions, we'll finish with this, about Dylan Raiola on Monday at the press conference for Matt Rhule and what he's seeing from Dylan Raiola week to week. Like, has this been a dip? His numbers are slightly down in the passing game in October versus September. We've seen him miss some throws that I think we expect Raiola to make. How does Rhule view this? And for the most part, he says that he continues to see great things from the freshman. The biggest area that Raiola has improved in the eyes of his head coach is that he's doing the things to get Nebraska into plays that give them situations to succeed. Now, if you listen to our first segment and you hear us talk about the screens, maybe you could, hey, Dylan, check out of the screens when they come in from Satterfield, and that's the number one read. or you're setting up, and screens aren't, there's a difference between screens and checkdowns. Like a screen is a play that's set up, like you've got the whole thing blocked. So you can, if you pop it past the first level, you get out there and you can get 20, 30, 40 yards. The checkdowns that we've seen too, especially against Indiana, those are more like third reads on a play, and it's not set up to be blocked the same way the back has to do, the back or the tight end has to do more work on his own. So Dylan, according to Rhule, has done a great job of diagnosing things in the second half in the couple games since the half point of the season, and getting Nebraska into plays where they can have some success. And I think we saw that at times in the second half against Ohio State.
Yeah, I think there's still some comfort, I guess, it feels like he's still getting that back. Whatever he was at the beginning of the season from a comfort level, I think he's still trying to, I guess, refine that again after the lapse in late September and into October. So there's that piece of it. And like, I think it needs to be said that he misses throws. Like he misses throws, whether it's the one that was obvious down the sideline to Banks that would have been a touchdown for Nebraska to take the lead, or just stuff where he doesn't get the ball out quite soon enough. Like I feel like he can handle that stuff, and so while a lot of the blame goes over to the wide receivers for not getting open or not blocking, and offensive line and everything else, like it's a wheel that needs all the parts working, in sync with each other. And it hasn't felt like it's been there over the last couple of weeks. And Raiola's a part of that. He's the quarterback. So I think it's coming along, but it's still not quite clicking yet.
As we get into November, I'm just looking at this. We talk about the quarterback and his ability to throw the ball, and you get in the Big Ten in November, and the weather becomes something that you have to pay attention to. And it's been a big thing for Nebraska in some games this year. The Rutgers game, it was a huge factor with the wind, and there's been heat. You start to look for cold. Saturday in eastern Nebraska, upper 50s and wind in the manageable range, like under 20 miles an hour. So really lucky. a nice November day for Nebraska. And Rhule did mention that he kind of wished that it would be cold this game, or winter-like in some kind of way with UCLA coming in. Like you're gonna bring the kids from LA. Well, Dylan Raiola is from Buford, Georgia, and Phoenix, Arizona, and he's lived in North Texas. Like he's somebody, and along with many of Nebraska, Ja'Cory Barney. I don't think the cold weather is going to be all that nice for the freshman from Miami. So this seems okay. Like it looks like a game that's not going to affect looks like weather that's not going to affect the passing game too much, which is where you'd like to see it for Dylan Raiola here.
Rhule really loves the idea of putting his guys through tests, doesn't he? I would say you only get 12 games a year. If you could keep miserable weather out of like 10 of them, that would be awesome and preferable, especially for the quarterback. So do you think disagree?
Do you think if you're Ja'Cory Barney and Dylan Raiola, do you think that the 2 days or 5 days in winter conditioning last year, where they went outside and pushed sleds through the ice and snow, is that going to acclimate you to a point where if you're playing UCLA on a cold day in November, that you've all of a sudden got the advantage?
Mitch, you've lived here for all your life. I've lived here for all my life. You never get used to it. You don't.
Well, you do more so than a guy coming in from LA, but yeah, it doesn't make it any easier to deal with. That's for sure.
All right. That is it for us. We'll have plenty of weather talk as we go on throughout November. Don't worry about that, because it's Big Ten football. Appreciate you guys listening and making us your first listen. Now go check out the Locked On College Football podcast, which we want to be your second listen of the day. Spencer's got you covered all the way through week 8 and looking ahead to now the playoff. That's the Locked On College Football podcast in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.